In this video, we're going to be taking a little bit of a deep dive, but not too deep, in the fill to satin functions of InkStitch. And I really highly encourage you to explore and experiment a little bit with this tool, because if you do really get a good grasp on how the tool functions, you'll find that it is pretty straightforward to use and you can get some pretty predictable results. And this video all came about because someone had messaged me privately and was talking to me about another video that they had watched by Low Tech Linux, and he has lots of videos on InkStitch and apparently has used it for years and years and years. And this is one of the things that he was demonstrating in this video. And uh, some of his techniques were more involved than just using the fill to satin feature. So they were wondering, because they didn't have a lot of Inkscape knowledge, would there be an easier way to achieve the same results that this other video was achieving? And so I took a look at the situation and saw what was going on and determined that yes, with a little bit of tinkering and a little bit of understanding how fill to satin really works, you can get predictable results quite easily. So that's really what we're going to cover here. Now I am going to link to that video by Low Tech Linux, so if you want to check that out, and I really enjoy when I'm trying to learn something, I really enjoy looking at the exact same topic from multiple different people, because a lot of people will come at it from multiple different angles, and ultimately the more knowledge we have, the better results that we're going to get, and probably the quicker results that we're going to get too. So I picked out a couple of letters here, as you can see, that have some unique characteristics to them. For example, the I, it's very, very straightforward on the I, and the T is also pretty straightforward, but actually most of these letters do kind of have a little bit of a special condition. So I don't know. Let's just start with this letter P here. And this is something that you're probably not going to grasp the first time around. We're probably going to have to go through this a couple of times to really get a true grasp of what's actually happening here. So I am going to go over to outline mode. So I have a keyboard shortcut for that. So if you go up here to the view menu, and you'll see the display mode normal or outline. I like to work in outline mode. I think this will be easier for you to see. So the first thing that we have to ask ourselves in order to use this fill to satin function is how we actually want this to stitch out. So the way I'm thinking is we would just have one singular satin column going top to bottom, and then we're going to connect to that satin column and come around, and then we'll have one singular satin column going across. Okay, so with that in mind, that is going to tell me where I need to put my rungs and create my bridges and so on and so forth. So this is a whole process that we're just going to walk through and just take a look at. So the first thing that we want to do is go into our pencil tool, or you could use the pen tool, either one, to create our paths. And we're going to create that first path. Now we do want to come over here. Yes, okay, so we do need our rungs to have a stroke color. And so one rule of thumb is we always want a rung to cap. Now it doesn't have to be right at the end. So we do need to cap off everywhere. And this is really important. And in fact, I think you'll see in that video that I'm going to link to, there was some issues when he did not cap off in his example. So that's kind of rule number one, always cap it off, okay? So that's rule number one taken care of. So now we need a way to tell InkStitch we want to go from top all the way to the bottom. And so we have this big gap here that we need to deal with. So the way we're going to deal with that gap is we're going to come here and click here, and then we're going to come down. Well, where do we come down to? Well, this is kind of arbitrary, but in this case, I'm going to come way down here. Okay, and I'm kind of doing that just to illustrate a point that you can exaggerate this part a little bit. And then we're going to come from here down to here. Okay, now let me explain what's going to happen here just so you understand. So what's going to happen here is because we have a rung here and because we have a rung here, the rail that's going to be created is going to be created from that intersection to that intersection. This rail is going to be extended from there to there, and it's just going to be a straight line. Okay, you'll see that when we do the conversion, what I'm talking about. But that is what's really happening here. So this side is going to be broken off right there at that intersection and right there at that intersection, essentially. And like I said, this will all make more sense when we actually do the conversion. All right, so now what's the next thing we have to do? Well, we've created the bridge here, but we're going to need to create the bridge over here. And so what we have to do is let's go back in and grab our pen tool. And what we're going to do now is we're going to come in with our bridge. Now, I haven't really experimented with this too much, but you see this bridge? It is crossing over our two rungs, but I believe we do not want the bridge to cross over that path, okay? Like I said, I haven't really experimented to test my theory, but just in general, where we're putting our rungs and where we're putting our bridges and the paths that we're crossing over in the process is really important for how InkStitch is going to interpret everything, okay? So now we have all of that done. Now what we're going to do is we're going to then create another situation. So we're going to come now, again, this is going to be best if you just experiment, test this out. And in fact, if you want this exact SVG file just to try these exact letters yourself, just drop us an email. The link is in the video description, and I'll send that file to you. But at any rate, we're going to come to the inside here and come all the way over here. Now, we want to come over, but we don't want to cross over that rung. So we'll come as far as we can. And then all we're going to do is we're going to come right up here and do this. And then we're just going to create a little bridge there, okay? Now, it's really kind of interesting is where this crosses over and how this extends to this rung. Again, you'll see that when we actually go and do this conversion, how this is all going to work. So now we need to do something similar with this big gap. So we'll come in here and we'll come way down here almost to that rung, I think. And then we'll do the same thing. We'll just come up here and we'll come down here and then we'll connect. Okay, now something to keep in mind is our bridges are at the angles. You can see our rungs are at these angles. And in my opinion, it doesn't matter too much that, what angle all that is. So now we're just going to keep coming in here. So we'll add a couple of stitch angle rungs here so we can kind of better control exactly the results that we're going to get. Now there you go. I think that is in fact going to get us the results that we want. Now it looks like a hot mess, right? And that's one of the reasons why I kind of don't like rungs. But for the fill to satin to work, we have to have the rungs. And yes, it looks like a hot mess here, but when we look at the actual path, nothing is crossing over. It's very, very close. But you see, nothing is crossing over, so one another. Everything should work out just fine. So let's go ahead and try it. So we're going to select everything, and if I have a keyboard shortcut, but you can go to InkStitch, Tool Stroke, or Tool Satin rather, and fill the satin. You can see I use Shift Alt S. So I always use Shift Alt S. Brings up the dialog box. I can hit apply. Now I don't select any of these options. I just go straight to it, hit apply. And that live preview is probably not necessarily a bad thing either if you want to experiment without without really taking a look. But if you look visually, everything basically looks like it's going to work. And one thing I really want to point out here is this. This is a straight line. Now you see when it creates this, it puts it in a group. So I don't really like groups. So I'm just going to ungroup it. But you see that straight line I was talking about right there? From that rung down to this rung, it just created that straight line. Now we can go in here with our node tool and kind of, so that when the satin comes down, it's going to be a little bit more curved. It's not going to be just straight across there. Okay. And so everything else I think is going to be pretty good. So I'm going to be pretty satisfied with that. Now notice that that rung that we created on the inside here is gone. All right, but that's kind of where it cut it off there, so to speak. So let's look at this in params. So you could see that we get the exact result that we were looking for. And I think that's really powerful, that tool works the way it does, because like I said, once you really understand where those rungs have to be and where the bridges have to be for these unique conditions, you'll get the expected results that you're expecting. You can get some crazy results if you're not careful of where those rungs and bridges are made. So that takes care of that one. So now that we've learned a little bit about how the rungs and bridges work, what about the R here? So this is another unique situation. I'm going to have my satin column come down, just like we did with the P. So it's going to come down, and then like the P, it's going to come over, and then we're going to have a satin column going like this, kind of like an L shape. So how do we place our rungs? Well, we know for sure that we have to cap everything. So that's going to be step one. Cap it all off. Okay. We have a sharp corner here. It's not going to hurt to add one there. Okay. Now we do need to whack this off. So we can go ahead and put a line there. We could put a line just to the inside there. And we could put a bridge there. Okay, so we know all of that's going to be taken care of. And then, likewise, we're going to cap this off at this end. And we're going to cap this off at this end. And then, nice and tight, we're going to, you know what, just for giggles, let's have that cross over this outside path and see if that really matters. I don't know, haven't tested it, but let's go ahead and do it that way. And then where it's going around the corner, let's add some. And we'll add one here in the middle. Now here, we're going to come down just like so. And then we need to do that on the inside. And then we're going to create our little bridge. And that's for this piece of the R here. Okay, so I think we're good to go there. And I think I will just go ahead and add one there. Now, what we have to do is we have to create this other one. So we're going to go here. We're going to go here. And then we're going to just connect those two. Okay. So, but you see how far down I went. I went pretty far down. So there's going to be a straight line that's generated from that all the way down to here. Okay. Now, and then here, I'm kind of interested to see. I think what's going to happen is we're going to get a straight line from that intersection to that point right there. Let's see if I'm right about that. I'm just going to pull over a couple of guidelines. Okay, one there, and I'm fairly certain that that intersection is going to be like that. And let's just try that and see what happens there. Okay. So let's see, do I need one up here? It's not going to hurt us to put one there. So you can see, again, it looks like a hot mess. Okay, but we went with that same convention that we used previously, so I think that's all we need to do. So let's go ahead and select everything, Shift Alt S, and hit apply. Okay, so now it's converted, and look at here. Remember I said I was really concerned about that extension over that outside line, and sure enough, I'm fairly certain this caused us some issues. So let's undo that. And now let's take a look at a couple things here. So see this rung here? It's really close to the end. So I'm going to just move that in a little bit because I saw a weird little anomaly here. Not too much, but this it did not like at all. So let's bring that back inside. Everything else did seem to go ahead and convert okay. So let's try it again. Shift Alt S and apply. And we'll close that out. And you can see we still have a bit of an issue there. And I suspect the issue that we're having is that this rung is just a little bit too close. We had a similar encounter over here, but this rung is just a little too close to the edge. So let's just see what happens if we move that in. You know, we could move that in a fair bit. Okay. So we don't want to cross over this, but so now we've moved that in, you know, a fair bit there. So now let's see. Control Shift Alt S rather. No, it was Control. Yeah, fill the satin. Sometimes I forget my shortcut keys. And close. And see, this is what I was talking about. If we understand how the tool works, okay, the way it was designed, then we, going forward, we should have pretty good success. Now, visually looking at this, you could see here, we don't have that weird anomaly that we had previously. Down here, we don't have that weird anomaly previously because our rung wasn't right up tight to the edge. Our rung was right up tight here, and it caused a bit of an issue. It was right up tight here, caused a bit of an issue. You could see that rung that we created on the inside there, that worked out better. Now, you notice how this is straight up and down, right? So this is a little bit weird, and as is this. But here's the thing I want you to kind of keep in mind. Notice where this is right at the intersection. Now watch, I'm going to undo this just so we can really get an understanding of what's happening here. So I'm going to undo what we just did and see what's happening. It's connecting from right there to right there. So that's what's happening there. So for example, if I were to just kind of do something like that, where this is kind of sort of, and we could even do this to the extreme. Let's do that to the extreme. So now it's going to come from here and connect right there. Okay. And you can see it's doing the same thing over here. So if we wanted it, we could use kind of like an imaginary line where those two would connect. So now let's just process it and see if we get the expected results. So we could go ahead and Shift Alt S. And you'll see what I mean here now. So see how this is really exaggerated now, where it's coming way to the inside? But you can see how far it's coming up. It's coming up where that rung used to be. See there? That's where that rung used to be. So the point is when we're doing our interior rung, if we kind of just eyeball, like if this was just to keep going, then we can get a more predictable result. So you see, we'll put that there, and this one here, we'll just connect there, and then we'll get a more predictable result. So up here, it was connecting right there, but if we take this rung, okay, and we bring it down to where that would just kind of die into it, then that connection is going to happen right there to right there. Okay, we can get just a more predictable result. And then this is going to come from right here to right here, so we may want to extend it a little bit, but we cannot cross over that line. So we just have to be kind of careful with what we're doing exactly. But now, if we go back in there, Shift-Alt-S, hit apply, we're going to get the results that we expect. And let's look at it in params real quick. Use my keyboard shortcut. Control-Alt-S is what I use. And I'm really glad, I know this is going to sound strange, but I'm really glad we get this unexpected result, because this is going to happen from time to time with Fill to Satin. It just is. So what's happening here? Well, the simple truth of the matter is, if we go back and look at this, if we look at what's happening, everything is the right way. Okay, so everything is the right way. And visually looking at this, everything looks to be correct. All of our conditions are met. Okay, so let's see here. I was going to go ahead and so let's ungroup this first of all. Get rid of that group. And then this, I was just going to, this path here, right here, I was just going to move that out a little bit. But this is the problem path right here. So what's happening? Well, the first thing that we see is we see lots of nodes. So we could go ahead and simplify this a little bit. I don't know that necessarily that's going to help, but all I did was hit Control-L on my keyboard. And if we do that a couple of times, it's going to eliminate more and more nodes. Now, sometimes when we do that, you'll see the path change drastically. In this case, I did not see the path change whatsoever, but let's look at that in params and see if just doing that did anything for us. So we just have that one piece selected, and you can see that we still have an issue. So what's next? What's the next step? Well, the next step is always to check, and it could be a couple or two or three different things, but this is kind of the process that you go through. So we've lowered the number of nodes, so we've simplified the number of nodes. So the next thing is just to try to reverse a rail. So we're going to try to reverse the first rail. And what do you see? You see it going ahead and being the satin stitch result that we wanted. And that's usually one of those two things will fix the issue. Either we lower the nodes because there's some kind of node conflict there, or just reverse a rail and Bob's your uncle takes care of the problem. Okay? Doesn't come up a lot, but it does come up occasionally. So now we're moving on to the letter D. How are we going to handle the letter D? Well, and I should note that in all of this case, in each of these cases, in the previous video that I have linked to in the description below, he just manually recreated all these letters. And of course, you have to have a certain amount of skills in Inkscape to do that, but also it's time consuming and unnecessary if we really get a good grasp on how the Fill to Satin works. So for our letter D, I want the satin column to come down here, right? And then attach to the satin column kind of like this. So how do we make it do that? Well, this is, just basically just like all the others. So we're going to grab our path and we're going to say right there and right there, InkStitch, I want this to flow just like that. Flow right up. Okay, now we do need to cap off the ends, but we don't want to be super close. So we will cap off both ends, but not super close. We'll go ahead and throw one in the middle, even though we don't need to. So now we've taken care of all of that. Now we have to chop this one up. So remember what we're going to do here. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut it off right here. So we're going to take this one and this one. Now, I don't want to be way up here with this, technically. I want to come back down here. So this is kind of in line. That's the right way to do it. And then we're going to come into the inside here, and we're going to cut it off there. Okay. Now, the next one, we're going to cut we're going to cut this like this. Let's see, how are we going to do that? Let's do it this way. So this can't be over, it's got to be to the inside. And then let's cut this right here on the outside there. And then that tiny little bridge. Okay. Now this is kind of a unique situation. I don't know what's going to really happen here, but we're about to figure out. So now we do need some additional stitch angles here to kind of tell InkStitch what we're expecting. So maybe that will get the job done. I don't know. But let's go ahead and try it out. Shift Alt S and go ahead and hit apply. And we'll see if we get the expected result that we are expecting, and it appears that we did. Now, we had that rung up here, and we have this rung down here, so we got this kind of strange straight line going through. So the first thing we're going to do is let's get rid of our group. So we're going to ungroup it, and then I could just double click on that, and we can just kind of bend this like it was just keep coming, right? So now it's kind of just nice and smooth there. So now let's go ahead and look at this in params. Just the letter D here. And it looks like we do have the expected result that we were looking for. So that part's good. And you'll notice here that on the D, see how it kind of, this stitches first, and then our final satin column kind of covers this up a little bit. So what we can do here, if we look here, this path is ending just inside there. So if we wanted just a little bit more overlap, all we have to do is just slide those over. And then here we've kind of got the same situation. We could bring, if you wanted just a little bit more overlap, we could do that by just adjusting those two. So now we have a few more stitches of overlap. So let's go ahead and take a look at this, and you'll kind of see what I was talking about. So you see at both of those intersections, we have a few extra stitches of overlap, and I think all that looks pretty good. So we could choose apply and quit. And there you go. So the next thing that we're going to do here is our letter E. Now this is a kind of a special situation, if you will. What we want to do is we want to come and we're going to start on the inside of our E, and we're going to come around like this for our satin column. So we're going to come here and come around. Okay, that's what we want to do. So how do we achieve that? Well, let's do what we did on all the others. So we're going to cap it, okay? And then we have to tell InkStitch, hey, I need this to come through. So at this intersection, I need to come through. So we're going to go ahead and do what we did previously on either side. We're going to create a rung, and then we're going to create a bridge, and that's going to tell InkStitch we're coming through. And then we're going to come here, and here, and here. Okay, and then we're going to add a couple of rungs to control our stitch angles around the bend there. Okay, that should take care of that. And now let's see how this converts. So we're going to go ahead and select that and hit Shift Control S. Well, what the heck here? Control Alt S, I'm sorry. Shift Alt S, that's what it was. I forget all my keyboard shortcuts. But now let's go ahead and hit apply. Okay, so I think we did more or less get our expected results. So now we could go ahead and look at that in params. And sure enough, there is our expected result. So that looks great. So that's pretty straightforward. Now, the letter M here, I have not experimented with this, so I expect maybe we'll have success, maybe we won't. But we've seen all these other letters, okay? Now, the M is really no different than the rest, but we just have to kind of think about it just a little bit differently. But like I said, it is the same as all these. So we'll just work it through. So we're going to cap it off, okay? Don't get super close, but cap it off. And we're going to cap it off, and we're going to cap it off, and we're going to cap it off, okay? So we do need a cap, okay? Step one is complete. Now, how are we going to stitch this out? Well, we're going to have one satin column through here, and then we're going to have one satin column through here, and then we're going to have one satin column coming around and down, okay? So let's just start right here. We need to tell InkStitch what we need to be doing here. So we're going to come down here. I'm going to come down kind of close to this one, and we're going to tell InkStitch, come on down. Done. InkStitch now knows we want to go straight on through. So what's the next thing that we want to do? Well, the next thing we want to do is we want to tell InkStitch on here we need to come on down. So how do we do that? Well, we do it the same way. So we're going to create a rung there, and we're going to create a rung down here, and we're going to tell InkStitch, come on down. Okay, so now it's going to come on down. And we're going to go ahead and maybe add one rung there to kind of come around the bend with some stitches. But now we need to cut this one off. So we're going to do the same as we've done previously. So we're going to come all the way down where we want to make that connection. And this is the important one here. Where this crosses over is where that is going to be extended. So we're going to go right there. So we're going to get an extension from there to there. Okay, and we're going to have a bridge. Okay, so that should all work properly. Now all this should all be ready to go, but now we need to do something over here. Same thing. So we're going to click here, and then where are we going to make that connection? Maybe right there. And we'll click here and here. We're going to cut this off, and wherever that intersection is, that's where the extension is going to happen. So it's going to go right from there to there. Okay? And it's going to go right from here to there. And then we'll just go ahead and add a couple more rungs. And there you go. So it looks kind of funny, right? And certainly it looks like a hot mess. And it is. But this should get us the results that we want. So let's see if we're right. So we'll go ahead and Shift Control S. Shift Alt S. There we go. And apply. Don't make a liar out of me. And there you go. And yes, I think we're going to get the exact result we wanted. Now, what I do want to do right off rip, I could see I want to just extend that just a little bit, that little extension. And then this is a straight line here, which I don't want. So I do want a little bit of curvature back to the original. But I'm happy with that, and do the same thing over here. We're going to take that and make a little bit of a curve there too. And then you see this right here. I think I'm going to go ahead and delete that node and just slide this up a little bit. And make this segment straight. Okay, so you can see it's already extending over. And then what do we do down here? Why is this? I don't like that that's bent over there. That shouldn't be like that. What do I want to do? Let's go take that line and let's make it straight. Then we'll curve it. And yes, we'll give it just a little bit of a curve there. Okay, so tiny little modification there, but I think all in all, that's going to get us the result that we want. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like in params. Ta-da! It's looking pretty darn good. Okay. Now, if we want to kind of manipulate this a little bit better, we probably could just a little bit better. So maybe what we'll do is we'll adjust. I'll show you how we're going to do this. We're going to adjust that stitch angle a little bit. And now we have this path selected. So let's go back in here and we're going to hold down our shift key and we're just going to add a couple more stitch angles here. And that may help us. You know, this is kind of an extreme corner. That may help us, and honestly, it may not. But let's just look at that one section in params. See what that's going to look like. Yeah, I think that's really probably about as good as it gets coming around that corner there. So I'm pretty satisfied with that. So now let's look at all of it together. We'll look at all of it together in params. Of course, we don't have our stitch order in the proper sequence here. So maybe we'll go do that and then we could take a better look. So what we'll do is we'll click this first segment, hold our shift key, then this one, then this bottom one. And then for our R, we're going to go here and here and here. And then for our D, we're going to go to this segment and this segment. And then our E, and then our N. So we're going to go back in and click on that. Oh, we have a satin group here. So let's ungroup that first. Okay. Now let's go back in and let's start over. So here, here, here. Then this piece, then this piece, then this piece, and this piece, and this piece. And then our E. And then our piece of our M here. And then this piece, and then this piece. So now we can go up to extensions, InkStitch edit, and we can restack. It'll restack in the order that we selected. And now if we go into params, now we should see a little bit better result. You can see we don't have very many jump stitches. And we'll go ahead and assign our small satin basics. We'll choose load. And all that does is gives us a little bit more density and gives us a little bit more compensation, which I may back that off to 10%. But you can kind of play with that a little bit. But at the end result, you get the results that you're looking to get pretty easily with the fill to satin if we understand that our rungs and bridges are put in the right spot. Then you'll get excellent results pretty quick and easy. So I hope you experiment with that and try that out and follow along with the rules of fill to satin with where your rungs are, what paths they're crossing over. You can't have rungs over rungs. There's some rules there, but if you follow the rules, you should be able to really go through any font at all and be able to convert things very, very quickly. I did want to show you one other thing because I was kind of surprised in that previous video demonstration. He kind of took the long way around to make a dot of an I. Okay. So first of all, let's go to path and object to path. So we just have a simple circle here. So if you want to use fill to satin, it works just the same way as anything. He did not use fill to satin, but all we're going to do is do a little nip tuck up top and do a little nip tuck on the bottom. So you see how that path crossing over there? And then we'll go ahead and use fill to satin and I hit apply. And that's it. And that's all there is to it. Now, we do have an issue here, and I know what the issue is. And that's kind of cool that it tells us that. What the issue is that this circle does not have a fill. And that's my bad. In order to do fill to satin, you do have to have a fill. So we'll get rid of the stroke. Not on everything. Let's see here. What did we do here? Okay, I see it. Tried to convert it, maybe. I'm not quite sure. So no, we're not going to have no stroke. And now we could do it. Shift Alt S and apply. And yeah. So if we just have a solid circle like that, that's all we have to do. And then we can go ahead and look at that in params and hit apply. Oh, I don't know why I did that. My bad. That's not what I wanted to do. I went back to the fill to satin when I wanted to just look at that in params. So you can see that is the little dot of our eye, and we do get the expected results that we were looking to get with fill to satin. But that's just an easier way to. So if this was, if this was an eye, that would be an easier way to cap that off. Okay. So I hope you learned a little something, and I hope you experiment with that. And like I said, if you want these letters, these exact letters just to experiment with, I am going to do more examples of different fonts so you have a really good understanding on how fill to satin works, because it is such a sweet tool and it really simplifies the process of creating text. And so you can use any font that you want and get really good results really quick and easy once you have mastered all the rules of how that fill to satin works. Thanks for watching.